Okay, I think maybe we can get started if you're good with that, Teal.
Sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this week's AMA. My name is Lorraine. I am the community lead for events at Pathlife. Usually, our community lead for AMA, Mia, hosts this, and that's why we're on her channel. Sorry if that's a little bit confusing, but you're in the right place. And we are joined today by Teal Larson. So I'm just going to give a little bit of an intro, and Teal, if you want to add anything afterwards, just feel free to let us know more about you. But Teal is a software engineer at Grouparoo, which is a seed stage data pipeline startup. She has a non-traditional background and has been everything from a middle school reading specialist to a tiki bar server before breaking into tech. Before the pandemic, Teal worked on websites for her friends' small businesses as a hobby. And then when the bar she worked at was closed due to lockdowns, Teal bought a course on web development to stay busy. And the rest, as they say, is history. So she attended a local nonprofit coding boot camp in the Seattle area, and then did some self-study along with freelance work. Teal landed her first official role 3 months out of boot camp when the CTO of Grouparoo reached out to her via email. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And while she thought she'd end up at a large established tech company, Teal has found the pace and energy of startups and the open source community to be an exciting place to start her career and advance quickly. And now she's here today to chat about working in startup life, her transition into tech, and any questions you might have that you can just put in the chat. So welcome, Teal.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So just to get started, we heard from your intro that you've had a really exciting series of careers before software engineering. And so apart from the pressures of the pandemic kind of affecting your previous job, was there anything in particular that ignited your interest in software engineering?
Yeah, so I think that, one kind of common thread that has been present in each of my careers is like helping people. Like as a middle school reading specialist, I was like very directly in a helping people-oriented profession. I was a birth doula for a short time after leaving teaching, like very people-oriented, helping, serving others, a server, literally serving others. And then, I think that a lot of people don't necessarily think of it that way, but software engineering is also people-focused and serving others. Like I'm building software to be used by people to help make the world a better place, to help make people's lives easier. And so I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy about software engineering. I also, was making on a good night, like $22 an hour serving. And, that was great. It was more than I made an hour teaching, honestly. But like, I wanted to advance, financially as well, if I'm completely honest. And it's something I've kind of dabbled in tech since I was in middle school, roughly, maybe earlier. Actually, earlier. I wrote my first program when I was like 7 with my dad.
Oh, wow.
My dad was a software engineer, which is part of why I thought that I would never do it. But it's always been there as like a hobby, and I was like, maybe I'll try it out. And the more that I've played with it, I guess, because it feels like play, really. The more that I've played with it, like in terms of solving new problems, learning new things, the more I fall deeper and deeper in love with software engineering as a career. It's an awesome place to be.
That's a really awesome way to look at software and how it really is made for other humans. Like the code that you're writing is made to be read by other humans, understood by them, but also to serve them. And I think like some of us really resonate with what it is that pushed you towards software engineering, like me in particular. I understand the financial aspect, but also the aspect of like, it's something that's creative. It's something that also helps other people in a different sort of way. So thank you for sharing that. Can you talk about what it was like when you first transitioned into a tech role? And do you see any overlap in skill sets you learned from past jobs that now help you with software engineering?
Yeah. So when I first was working, like when I started my work with Grouparoo, yeah. So with that, it was in some ways super different from anything that I'd done before. I'd never worked remotely before, aside from like working for myself. So it was interesting getting to know a new team in this like fully remote world that we're in. And it was in some ways super intimidating. We have like a huge code base. Our mono repo is massive. And so, you know, diving in and beginning to take on stories and do work with a new code base was really intimidating. And I was grateful that part of my onboarding included a lot of pairing time with the person who I was reporting to. And so that helped a lot. I think any opportunity still that I get to pair with another engineer, whether it's someone more experienced or less experienced, I walk out learning new things. So I loved the pairing part of it. And in terms of crossover between things that I'd done before, I think a lot of the communication skills that I brought from my other positions was immensely helpful. Working on a distributed remote team, you have to be able to communicate your work in writing. Like a lot of the work that we do is asynchronous. And so we, you know, move things forward by talking in Slack or by creating a doc to present, you know, an idea rather than having a meeting every single time. And so being able to communicate my thinking in writing has been hugely helpful. I think also like my undergraduate degree was in language, literacy, and cultural studies. And so I think along with that, some of that, I don't know, cultural understanding. Tech is a completely different culture than the other industries that I'd worked in. I am also the only female engineer at our company. And so, you know, culturally, there are some things that are different there, especially coming from teaching, which was almost primarily female. So there's definitely, I think, been a lot that has crossed over, and it's been fun. I think I also still get to feed that teacher itch that I have through blogging and through speaking and through being involved in like the greater community too.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I think communication particularly is one of those skills I feel that software engineers emphasize, that you don't, it's not technical, but it's something that's really important. So when you were interviewing for your first role, apart from communications, like what non-tech skills did you emphasize? And do you recommend those coming from non-traditional backgrounds to do the same?
Yeah, so I also emphasized problem solving quite a bit. Ways that I tackled, you know, problems that were maybe not super clearly defined. That's something that I think we encounter a lot in software, and particularly with this being a seed stage startup, like there's a lot of undefined and a lot of unknowns. And so being able to demonstrate how I was able to walk through something where there wasn't a clearly defined solution, I think was helpful. I know also because I've asked the CTO who reached out to me, I was like, why did you even reach out to me? Because the role they were hiring for was mid-level, which I did not have experience for a mid-level position, but they reached out anyways. And he said what had stuck out was the self-study that I'd done. Because I had dove like beyond my boot camp into learning Ubuntu, like how to run a server. I dove into different types of databases, Python. And so just demonstrating that I'm learning and growing beyond just what is being given to me And then also the writing that I had done was also something that stuck out to them, just in terms of trying to be involved with the community at large. Yeah, those are the main pieces. I directly asked about that. I was like, so why did you hire me?
Yeah, that's nice that they shared that with you, and that's really cool that they saw so much potential in you based on the extra things that you were doing, and also things like writing, which I think a lot of other people who we've talked to at AMAs also have emphasized. And I actually, since you talked about your current role, that was kind of where I wanted to pivot to. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you landed that position? You said that the CTO reached out to you via email and you almost marked that email as spam. How'd that happen?
Yeah. So the job hunt process is kind of brutal for anybody who's in that right now. My thoughts are with you because it's rough. There's a lot of I was used to recruiters reaching out with like, oh, here's this role. And it's like a senior level role that requires 7 years of experience. And I'm like, you didn't even actually look at anything that I had. So I was so used to getting all this spam, and I was like, I've never heard of this company. I've never seen this company. I've never heard of these names. Like, what in the world? And I almost deleted the email. And then I was like, what if it's not? Like, what if it is actually somebody with an actual company? Like the worst that's going to happen from me responding to this email is that I get one more piece of practice writing an email responding to somebody. Like the worst that could happen is I get some extra practice, especially because it was mid-level and I was like, that doesn't even line up. But I was like, if they do want to interview me, the worst that happens is I get extra practice interviewing. And so I emailed back and we set up a time to do a call via their Calendly. And then when it came time for the call, I had thought that it was a phone call. And so I was like, I don't know, in a hoodie with like my hair a mess, like laying on my bed waiting for this phone call. And like, it's 2 minutes after the call starts. And I was like, what? Like, this is not very professional. And so I rechecked the calendar invite and it's a Google Meet. I was like, oh, crud. And so I'm like, well, I guess this is how I'm doing this call. And so I hop on. And I almost think that helped a little bit, that I was like, not so well put together, right? Like I was playing it cool or something, but the call went great. And I ended up interviewing a few more times. I had a behavioral interview, a technical interview. And then one cool thing that I loved about this startup was they had a full day of pairing with the CTO. It was a company of 5. So like the CTO was a third of the engineering team at that point. But it was a full day of pairing with the CTO, paid as part of the interview process, just to see like what you're like to work with. And, make sure that you get along with the team. Cause I think a lot of times it happens where you hire someone and you're like, oh, wow, this person is not what they seemed like in the interview. So that was cool. And that was a huge like green flag for me, that they're like paying my time for this. So that was amazing. I, throughout the process, through each of those steps, came in with 1,001 different questions because I did not think that I wanted to work at a startup. In fact, I was fairly adamant. This is another reason that I almost did not respond to the email. Was I grew up with a dad who was a software engineer, who worked for startups, who started startups. And, our family was like fairly ravaged by the startup crash in the early 2000s. Like, I wanted nothing to do with it. I was going to get my job with like a Microsoft or a, LinkedIn or GitHub or like some large company. And I was going to work with that large company for like 27 years. And that was like my career plan. And so, I was like, okay, worst case scenario, this is just a practice interview for Microsoft. And then what I found, I was lucky, I had a mentor who actually, this is really sweet. This guy, my dad had mentored him when he was in college.
Oh, wow.
And my dad passed away in 2017, but my mom has stayed in touch with Steve. And so Steve gave me the rundown of like, here's what you want to know about a startup before you dive in. Here's the things that you want to say if they ask you this type of question. Oh, they're do data pipeline stuff. They'll probably want you to know this about like data models. And so having that resource was amazing, incredible. And I think walking in with all of those questions, A, solidified that I did actually want to work with them. And B, showed that I was interested and was also a positive reflection on me, I think, in the interview process, just that I wanted to know more and was also making a careful decision instead of just like, I need a job, somebody hire me, which was kind of some of the feeling as well. It's like, I really need a job. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that sentiment of like, I really need a job is very relatable to maybe a lot of our viewers. And that's such a beautiful full circle moment with your mentor. I love that story. And I also really love that you had what seems like a very positive interview experience. I feel like, tech is an industry where the interview experience gets a bad rap. And it seems like you had a great one. And that you could roll up in your hoodie.
I had some not great ones prior to that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that too. But yeah, Lizzie was saying that she loves that they paid you for that time. And do you want to talk about some of your not great experiences and how you kind of bounce back from that?
Oh, well, the worst one was actually a mock interview. So one of the things that I really loved about my boot camp was that they had these mock interviews after you finished with the coursework. The coursework included a full month of doing nothing but recording videos of yourselves solving whiteboarding problems. So I had like 40 hours of, I still have them somewhere, probably recordings of myself solving data structure and algorithm problems, like 40 hours. And then once you finish those, you got access to, you would get an invite to sign up for a mock interview. And so they would have people come in from Oracle or Salesforce or Microsoft, different big name tech companies in the Seattle area, and perform these mock interviews. And one of them almost made me cry in the middle of the interview. It was brutal. It was a depth first search. And I felt like he jumped in kind of soon to help. I wish that I'd been allowed to struggle a little more. But the gentleman who was conducting the interview jumped in and kind of walked me through it, and I was able to make it out of it alive. I did not cry during the Skype, but it was hard. It was humiliating. And then to make it worse, at the end of it, he was like, I'm going to be real with you. I've worked at the company that I'm with for such and such years, and I've never had to do anything like this on the job. I was like, well, then why are you asking it? The company so Grouparoo, actually their coding interview was solving an actual problem that was something that they'd already solved in their code base, and they knew of multiple different approaches, and they kind of wanted to see you walk through your thinking about the different, ways to go about solving this problem. It was something that, was directly relevant to the type of work that you'd be doing. And that is so much more valuable. I also got to sit on interview teams, when we were looking to hire new people for our company. And it's so much more valuable to see how somebody is going to attack a problem that's similar to the work that you're doing. So none of my other interviews made me cry. There were a couple where I felt like it went great. And then I got to, a certain interview question and my mind just went completely blank. There was a front end interview and I had to make I had to make some component and my mind just went completely blank on React hooks. Like I couldn't remember any React hooks or anything about how to handle state. It just completely shut down. I did not get that role. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like it was really serendipitous. I'm super grateful for where I ended up. And I think that there are good companies out there. I think that there are a lot of good companies out there. And I think there are a lot of companies that still have broken hiring processes. Although there's a lot of conversation going on about it right now. And so I feel like hopefully companies are or will be moving in that direction of having a more, really it's more useful for them too, of an interview process.
Yeah, for sure. I'm picking up on that vibe too within just like the general tech space where everyone's talking about how, oh, the interview should be more representative of the kind of work that you're actually doing at your job, as opposed to like, I don't know, random LeetCode problems.
Right.
And yeah, I do also hope that that's something that companies take into account and like make the interview process work for both parties better. But yeah, well, speaking of interviews and also startups, what are some specific things about working in an early stage startup that you think it's important for new engineers to know, especially as they're applying to jobs?
So it has been so cool being in an early stage startup early in career. So one thing to know is that you have to be okay with there being less structure and less definition because everything is being created, everything's new in a startup, especially, like seed stage. So in terms of startups, there's like, you build your first thing and then you try and get some funding and you get that first bowl of money and that's your seed stage. Okay. And then you try and build like version 1 of your main product. And that is roughly around when you are raising Series A, and then there's Series B and so on and so forth. So seed stage is like really, really early. There were 5 people in my company. So there wasn't even a job description for a junior level engineer until I'd been doing it for like almost a year. And then they were like, you're probably more like mid. So we're gonna make, we'll just adjust the job descriptions a little bit and there you go. So, being okay with things being ill-defined and also, I really enjoyed being a part of the process of building up those definitions. I enjoyed being able to dive in and be like, this sounds like a really cool feature. I would love to investigate how to build that and be in charge of building it. Like I got given the ropes on so many things that I wouldn't have gotten to be in charge of for, I don't know, months, years, a very long time. I got given, a lot of responsibility and freedom in ways that there's no way I would have gotten, close to that in a more established company. And so that was amazing. One thing that I think could be difficult for people was I also had to advocate for myself. There were times where I was like, hey, this is really difficult for me. I would like more support up front, working together to come up with a common definition of what the solutions should be for my tasks. Or, hey, I would really like more dedicated pairing time with other engineers on the team. And so I had to, when I hit a difficult spot, I had to work on being able to identify a solution or be vulnerable to like reach out to my supervisor during a one-on-one and work together to come to a solution. So there's definitely, I think, more you have to be okay with advocating for yourself, because I would have burnt out bad if I hadn't been like, hey, I need some more help and support with this. I'm really enjoying it, but it is hard. Please help. Yeah. And then, it is a risk. Startups are a risk. Most startups don't make it. It is a fact. And so if that risk is okay for you, for your family, for whatever situation that you're in, then great. And if it's not, that's okay too. Not everybody's okay with that level of risk or the potential that, a year down the road or 2 years down the road or whatever, things might abruptly change, because the startup world changes super fast. So you may find out, 2 weeks ahead of time that, hey, we're closing our doors, we've been acquired or whatever. Situations roll out super fast in the startup world. And if that's not okay with you, that's, you should know that about yourself up front, before you go in. Overall, for me, I thought that I was super risk unaverse, I guess. I don't know, just from my background growing up in the tech world, it terrified me. But that was, I felt comfortable walking into what I walked into because I asked all of those questions during the interview. What's your runway like? What is your vision for the company? The 3 co-founders of my company had worked before at other successful startups. They had worked before together. Both of those were really important for me and reassuring for me. It wasn't just like 3 people in college who had like met online and come up with this startup, which happens and is successful. But like, you might start working together with someone and all of a sudden realize that you don't get along. Like these people had worked together, they knew each other, and that was really reassuring to me. So yeah, ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, for sure. You asked really great questions, and these are really good insights for people who are trying to decide whether they want to go down like the big tech company route or startup route. I'm kind of having that like internal conversation with myself too. So thank you for that insight. And I think we have a question about that. So Sylvia is asking, how is the flow of a startup? I know that in a startup, you can have really fast periods and really slow periods. Is there any advice on balancing that?
I think a lot of that will depend on the team that you're on. So I personally was on, am on a super supportive team. Like we're not encouraged to, be working through the weekends or overworking in any way. I haven't felt that pressure. It's possible that were we in a hyper growth phase right now, there might be more of that pressure, but I think that having your own boundaries, working with teammates who also have boundaries is great as well. Like one of the draws for me with this company was that they actually had, like, you earn your PTO. There's a lot of companies that give unlimited paid time off, and that's like secret code for nobody ever takes paid time off. And so I really liked that this company, like, you actually earn the PTO. So like I look online and I know, and I'm like, I have earned this. It is fully valid for me to take this. And so I think, yeah, I can't, like, we aren't in a phase of hypergrowth. We haven't hit that. And so I can't necessarily speak to what that's like, but I can say that I think at any stage in a company, the people who you're working with are going to dictate a lot of that, like in terms of what expectations they'll place on the team. Like, I think a good company who's in that stage would also be hiring engineers and, I don't know, HR or like a people team to help make sure that their employees are okay, hopefully as well. And yeah.
No, that makes sense. Do you think that at some point in the future you will move on to like a bigger, more established tech company, or are you happy with startups and maybe just staying with startups for a while?
I mean, we'll see. I haven't gotten burned by them yet. We'll see if I change my tune. if anything ever hits the fan. But for now, I have really loved the opportunities that are available to me. Like, I've gotten to crawl all over our stack. I've gotten to work on our website, on our back end. I got to develop our on-call procedures and all of the metrics readings and things that go to that in AWS using Terraform. Like, I've gotten to dive into so many different things. Like, it's been so fun. And I've also, I don't know, I've enjoyed getting to have a say in a lot of things. Personally, I think it's super fun. So it's totally possible that if the right opportunity showed up, I might go with a bigger company, or if I end up, burned out by a startup at some point, maybe. But right now, it's so fun.
That's good. Yeah, I'm glad you're having fun, and that you appreciate being able to wear all of these different hats. Like, I think for me, I think that's indicative also of how you've been able to go through different careers, like different jobs in the past, and now you're kind of doing the same thing in one field, in one position, but you're like have all these different hats. So
totally
very cool that you're like all over. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, you talked about how before you started this full-time role, you did a little bit of freelancing. And what was your experience like? Do you have any advice for people who are currently trying to juggle studying and freelancing in particular? Because this is me. I'm asking for myself, to be honest. I'm not asking for a friend, but part of our boot camp is to find a freelance client, and that's like a requirement for the boot camp. And I was just wondering, like, what was that like for you when you were juggling these things, studying and freelancing?
Yeah, well, so one thing that I was grateful for before I started freelancing was my work previously as a birth doula. My training for that had involved some really excellent training on writing great contracts that will keep you from burning out. Because in that position, you're literally on call like 24 hours a day for a certain period of time. So I got really good at writing a contract that like explicitly spelled out, here is what I am doing as a part of this agreement. Here is what I am not doing as a part of this agreement. And here's what you're doing and not doing as part of this agreement as well. And I think having that structure helped me to be able to keep it manageable. I never had, a ton of clients at a time or anything. How I found clients was really just like word of mouth and friends, like people who I knew who had a small business. And I was like, hey, I started by just bartering. I was like, hey, this is a really cool piece of furniture that you have for sale. Like, what if I give you some help with your website for the furniture? And it worked. And then, from there, like they told their friend. And so I did a little bit of work for them too. And then someone else was like, hey, my website is fine, but people can't find it. And so I learned about SEO and did a little SEO consultant freelancing. And then a friend of mine needed a web app for something, and she had posted about it like a year and a half or 2 years previously looking for someone. And I was like, did you ever find someone to build that? She's like, no. It's like, great, I'll do it. And so just like looking for, I don't know, problems that needed solving. And, businesses need to be online. So people that I knew with businesses were a great target because, that's how they find people. The thing that I really missed in doing that and why I didn't want to freelance long term was I miss working with other people. I miss having a team, both because I like people and also because I think that it pushes and challenges me and helps me grow to be working with other people who have different experience and different knowledge. So freelancing was super fun, getting to like own things from beginning to end, but I love working with people.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, I think, where I'm trying to just get friends of friends or like whoever in the local area and maybe barter.
Yeah.
But, so apart from making sure you had a contract that like protected you, you seem to have been like grabbing a lot of these opportunities. And was there anything else that you did to kind of shield yourself from burnout? Because you're doing freelancing and then you were also like studying and whatnot. So what are your tips on that?
I never had very many at a time. I think I had burned out really bad in teaching. Like I hit a bad spot. I have a family, I have 3 kids. And so like, I can't afford to hit that level of burnout again. Like my family does not deserve that. And honestly, I think having that helps me in some ways to set better boundaries. Cause I'm like, my kids don't deserve, you know, me working all the time. Like I need to go play with them. Like they need that. And so to some degree that has helped me set better boundaries, but really just, I don't know. I also have a morning routine and I think that it helps me to stay self-aware, like about if I am getting close to a point of burnout. I think that that is super valuable to stay checked in with yourself. I read this book in like 2017 called The Miracle Morning, Hal Elrod. It's like a very, I don't know, self-helpy motivational book, but the principles behind it are great. And it seriously makes a difference in how my day goes. It involves like meditation, reading, writing, exercise, visualization. But doing those things to start my day off, I'm able to see where I'm actually at, like mentally, physically, emotionally, and think about if there's things that I need to do or change. And it's super important. And I notice a difference when I am active with practicing that in the morning versus when I'm not. Yeah, so I think just being self-aware and like learning where your limit is, and it might change. Yeah, and that's okay. Yeah. People change.
So true. Can you repeat the name of that book again for everyone who's watching?
Yeah, it was called The Miracle Morning.
Okay.
By Hal Elrod.
All right, everyone.
I listened to the audiobook like 4 or 5 years ago now. So yeah, I hope it was actually good now that I said it like on air. But the principles of it totally stuck with me. Like I'm still following them years later. So
yeah, it must be. Yeah. If you're still following them years later.
So. If nothing else, look up a blog post about it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I do want to leave some time for any audience questions. And it seems like we have a few. So
cool.
All right. So this one from Sylvia is saying, how did you communicate that you needed help with a coding problem? And if you did have a problem, who did you typically go to? I know you said that you spoke out in meetings, but do you have any one-on-ones with your CEO? Any advice in that sense? Like with, I guess, just generally, like who do you lean on for support in such a small company?
Yeah. One of the things that I loved that our company does is I have a one-on-one every week with the CTO, who is the person that I report to. And then I also have a one-on-one every other week with, so 1 week I have a one-on-one with the CEO and 1 week I have a one-on-one with the COO. And those are great because I can come with whatever questions or frustrations I'm having. And I've learned so much through those. Like that is invaluable time. That is, I would get a half an hour at each of those meetings, and just learning from somebody who has more experience than me was amazing. So I would reach out sometimes during one-on-ones. We also have a work Slack. And so sometimes I would, copy and paste like, hey, I'm getting this weird error that does not make sense to me. Has anybody seen this before? So sometimes I would just copy and paste something into Slack, or if there was another engineer on the team who I knew had been in a specific part of the code base, I might Slack message them directly. Yeah, those are the main ones. I mean, our team at this point is like eight or nine. So, we've grown a lot. We have more teammates to lean on. And one cool thing that our company introduced that has helped as well is we have dedicated pairing time. So twice a week for 2 hours, every member on the engineering team pairs with another member on the engineering team. Like, it's randomly selected who you're pairing with. And so it's really cool getting to learn from different engineers who I may not have reached out to before. Like, I learned, oh, this person is great to reach out to about testing questions, or this person is great to reach out to about, DevOpsy type things. And the other thing that I gained from that, in addition to like help with a specific problem that I was having, was I learned their debugging skills as well. So like, as we're sitting there working on a story together, I'm like picking up how they're walking through the problem. So then when I go and face, something that I can't quite figure out at first glance, I'm like, oh, I know that this engineer that I paired with last week would ask these questions and do this as he's clicking through the code base. Or, oh, I know that this engineer would add a console log right here to see what in the world is actually going on. And so I picked up some of those skills to be able to walk through problems independently as well. So picking up some more autonomy is awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. I never thought about that, like, being a big advantage of pair programming is that you pick up on each other's debugging skills. That's super valuable.
I didn't think of it either until I was like sitting looking at a problem, and I like literally heard one of the other engineers in the voice be like, well, what does this function do? And I was like, pairing is amazing.
That's really cool. Okay, let's see what the next question is. Okay, so KR Tog is asking, how did your experience as a teacher help you as a software engineer?
Yeah, I think we've touched on a few ways that it's helped me. And I think one thing that I haven't touched on yet is, especially being at a startup where I have been, in charge of like OKRs and stories and things that I might not have been in charge of at a larger company, is teaching gave me a lot of practice in kind of backwards design, like thinking about what is the end result that I'm trying to get, and teaching it's, I want kids to be able to do XYZ. And then think backwards about like, what are the steps that I'm going to get there? So like the lesson planning and the unit planning that I did as a teacher, very, very similar to the same type of process that I go through when I'm writing a spec for a new feature or researching a new UI testing library. And I think we've already kind of touched on like written communication, verbal communication. In terms of interviewing, I would say that I had a huge advantage in just being used to thinking out loud as I'm walking through a problem, and also like typing or writing at the same time. It's kind of a difficult skill to get down, but I had like a few years of practice of doing that all day, every day while teaching. Super useful skill.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always super interesting to hear people talk about how their past like experiences, past jobs translate over to software engineering. And I think teaching it's like a huge one that has a lot of those.
You wouldn't think of it.
Yeah.
I never took college level mathematics. My mathematics courses were all in like how to teach elementary school math. I was terrified of it. And now I actually read a book last month that has me wanting to sign up for a calculus course. I might take some calculus just for fun. But like, it's not required that you have a super technical background. Like, don't let that hold you back.
Yeah.
I have fallen in love with like set theory and the meaning of the number 0 and all of these super nerdy things. And I'm like, I've never taken calculus or trig or any of that. You know, so it's okay.
Well,
It's more about like
you're, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, well, it seems like you're gonna take calculus soon. So
I know. My husband was like, "You're a nut job." It sounds super fun. I read this book on the history of the number 0 and it blew my mind. I could do a whole hour-long talk just about that, probably.
Maybe we can have you on for that next time. Okay, and another question is, how have you managed the dynamic of having engineers who join later than you, but who have more years of experience? Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. When it first happened, I was slightly uncomfortable. I was like, I don't know how to interact with this person, but I think you just kind of learn. Like, there were certain things that I knew that he didn't. And so I was able to be like, oh, this is how this piece of the code base works. This is how this, this is how our actions work. This is how our tasks work, different things that we have in our code base. And then over time, it kind of shifted to like, wow, you know all this really cool stuff about React hooks and server-side rendering, and like, help me learn more about that, like me learning from those other engineers. And so I think it just kind of, naturally came over time. And in my experience, it's been less, and maybe this is just because my company hires awesome people. I don't know. The dynamic at different companies, your mileage may vary. But on the team that I'm on, in general, I think everybody has learned from everybody else on the team. Like, it isn't necessarily a years of experience thing. No engineer is going to know everything or even close to it. And nobody's expected to. Like, part of the whole gig is that we're all always learning from each other. So,
yeah, I think that might be really reassuring to the people in the audience who are like trying to break into tech and may think that they have to know everything. But yeah, you're right. The truth is, we don't know everything, and we shouldn't be expected to know everything. There's so much to know. It's impossible.
I think it's more valuable to walk into it, I don't know, engineering as a whole, and to be like, there's so much that I don't know, and it's exciting, and I get to like learn about it, and as different pieces connect, it's so cool to get to see like different pieces of the puzzle come together. Like, and I think that seeing that in an engineer is more valuable during the hiring process than seeing like, oh, this person can nail a depth first search on their first try. I think it's more valuable to see that people realize that they don't know everything and are excited to learn more.
Yeah, for sure. We don't have any other questions in the chat unless anyone wants to sneak a last minute one in there. I do have a fun question unrelated to literally anything engineering.
Okay.
But as someone named Teal, is teal your favorite color, or is it something else entirely?
Oh my gosh. So I don't think it's my favorite color. I, for years and years and years, avoided the color teal because I was like, oh, this is humiliating. My parents named me after crayon. So I like avoided it at all costs. And now, I don't know, it's kind of cool. My phone case is teal, sort of. I like it. I think mustard yellow tends to be the color that I gravitate towards. It goes with teal.
I was gonna say it's a complementary Okay, we'll take, yeah, I love mustard yellow too. And Lizzie says she does too. Oh my God, everyone in the chat is saying they love mustard yellow. Okay, so.
I have a serious problem with, yeah.
We'll take one last question just because we are going time. But here's one last question. Did you ever break production and how did you handle or process that?
Did I break production? Gosh, I'm trying to remember. I did. So this was kind of like high stakes. I don't know that I ever broke production, which is like the sign of an amazing team, because if I did ever break it, it was like such a team thing of like, oh, we'll fix this together, that like I don't even remember. But it working at a startup, like I volunteered to do all of the like SOC 2 engineering work, which we didn't know what that meant. Like nobody really understood what a beast that was. And so I ended up like learning Terraform to add all of the alarms for all of our AWS instances and all of our monitors and hooking that up to PagerDuty so that we could get paged if things went down. So that was kind of cool. And like doing updates on our customer databases and things, which was like terrifying. Like I'm updating a customer database in a way that if I fail is potentially very bad. But I don't know that I've ever I'll think of it like at like 1 a.m. tonight as like a cold sweat. I've definitely pushed like some typos and some broken things before, like to our website, which does go directly to production. I have pushed typos for sure. And I've pushed bad code that had lots of bugs, but we have a pretty solid review and release process. So those all got caught before they went to production.
That's good. That's good.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood.
Do it tomorrow now.
I know.
Tomorrow.
I know. Knock on wood. Well, with that, I just want to thank you so much for joining us and answering all of our questions. Do you want to give a shout out to where people can find you if they want to connect with you or like follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. I just recently changed my Twitter handle. It's now just Teal Larson, all one word. And then I'm on Dev Communities where I do my blogging. I've been wanting to move it to my personal site for a long time, but I've not. And in fact, I think my personal site is a whole thing. Anyways, you can find me on Dev Community, which is dev.to/Teal Larson. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Any last words from you?
Yeah, this is so fun. Like this is such a fun community to be a part of. I super love the work that's going on here and getting to see like folks who are like coming in behind me and kind of like help share my experience. I love being able to do that because I had, mentors along the way who helped me. And so seriously, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have questions or are curious or like freaking out about something. Like reach out. I'd be happy to chat about, more about what my experience was like and help you if I can.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you again. And thank you everyone for joining us. Hope we see you at the next one. All right. Bye everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.